want to go to Andy Card on this and the significance of this. Of course, the former chief of staff for President George W. Bush. Andy, when it rains, it pours. Now implications that former Vice President Pence discovered some documents. Someone was telling me the sheer volume of documents that churned out at the federal level on the part of presidents and vice presidents quadruples with each administration. I don't know how accurate that number is, but it would allow for stuff like this. But it does really appear out of control. What do you do?
Thank you, Neil, for having me on. But yes, it seems to be out of control. I would like to point out that classified documents aren't always only read in a skiff. When you're working at the White House, it wasn't unusual for me to have a classified document delivered to the Chief of Staff's office. And the president certainly looked at classified documents in the Oval Office. And my office was always swept by the Secret Service, so we made sure that people weren't listening in or whatever. But it wasn't as if every document is only viewed in a skiff. And when you leave the White House, the principal almost never cleans up his own mess or packs his own boxes. He has a lot of people helping. And I would suspect that that's what the situation was with President Trump. I suspect that's what it was with Vice President Biden. And I suspect it was that way with Vice President Pence. But having said that, it is wrong to take classified documents and not to make sure they're secure. And I think this is a problem. It's turning out to be a symptomatic problem in all of government. And I suspect that there are members of Congress who have come across violations or whatever, even in their world. Remember, they're separate from the executive branch. But no, this is a problem, and a pox on both their houses. It's just a sad state of affairs. But I hope it doesn't distract the leaders in Washington, D.C. from doing the people's business and really defending the integrity of the United States when they sell bonds. So I hope that our debt limit challenge will be met efficiently. There's always negotiations, but I hope that we will not be distracted because of these secret documents from doing the real work that has to be done to secure the integrity of the United States of America in a very, very troubled world.
What's going on? Well, it is to that point very troubled. But, you know, Andy, you said something interesting. You always say something interesting. But, again, from your perspective of having classified documents and having the level of security to review those documents, you would never leave with them, obviously. But I'm not looking at sinister intentions on the part of President Biden or Vice President Pence or President Trump before him. I am looking at, let's say someone is cleaning up after them or going to send boxes to them. Let's say when Donald Trump left office, someone is packing up boxes and not even paying attention to classified documents going into those boxes. Maybe that happened in the case of Vice President Pence. Maybe that happened in the days President Biden being a former Vice President Biden. I don't know, but this seems to happen way too easily, and people who shouldn't be looking at that stuff, who didn't have your security clearance, are looking at that stuff or potentially exposed to that.
I think that's the symptomatic challenge that we're discovering. And clearly, when you depart your obligations as a vice president or a chief of staff or the president of the United States, I don't think it's reasonable for us to expect that the principal is the one putting things in the boxes. I don't think enough concern has been shown to the people who are responsible for packing boxes and saying this shouldn't be here, this shouldn't be here. So yes, ultimately the president or the vice president or the chief of staff would be responsible, but I think that we probably haven't done a good job of making sure the people who are actually doing the task of packing boxes up is sensitive to what can go, what can't go, and which should go in a special spot.
Yeah, I hear it. I would almost be overwhelmed by the pressure of having looked at a classified document. I think, oh my God, I can't say anything about it. Forget about physically passing along to someone. That must be heavy pressure too, Andy. Thank you very much, my friend.
It's a very big burden to carry, I can tell you.
It is indeed. I'm sorry, my friend. I wish we had more time, but thank you very much. Your perspective, especially what you went through and the kind of stuff you saw, certainly after 9/11, bears repeating here. A lot of very sensitive things pass a lot of key people's eyes. So we're on that.